Welcome to the American Red Cross, the Eastern New York region, and Disaster Cycle Services, or DCS. And thank you for volunteering to help the Red Cross accomplish its mission of alleviating human suffering in the face of disasters. The main goal of this video is to help you choose the role you'll play in accomplishing our mission. We'll show you how Disaster Cycle Services is organized and managed in our region. We'll introduce you to the people you'll be working most closely with, both during your training period and throughout your Red Cross experience. And we'll also explain what lies ahead for you and where to go if you have questions. Our goal is to match you with a job you'll love to do. Since you decided to join us, you've spoken with a volunteer services worker, and together you decided that you're interested in disaster cycle services. Next, you spoke with someone in DCS to start you on the path that led to this video. After you complete this video and the Disaster Cycle Services and Overview course, you'll meet with two important people in your territory, the Disaster Program Manager and a representative of Disaster Workforce Engagement. At that meeting, you'll receive orientation to your territory, take your ID badge photo, and choose your Red Cross position. The Disaster Cycle Services and Overview course gives you a good idea of the breadth and scope of what DCS does throughout the entire disaster cycle of prepare, respond, recover. This statement was in that course and gives you a good idea of some of the things that DCS volunteers do. The purpose of Disaster Cycle Services is to help communities and individuals to be more resilient by reducing the impact of disasters on clients, meeting urgent human needs, and facilitating the communities and the individual's recovery through both direct action and by leveraging and supporting resources within the community. DCS volunteers play critical roles in all of those functions. This picture shows a Red Cross volunteer providing food to a client. But just think about all the things that have to happen to make that possible. Somebody got the ingredients for the food and prepared the food. Somebody drove the emergency response vehicle to get the food out to the affected area. Somebody has to maintain that emergency response vehicle. Somebody is managing the inventory of everything the Red Cross handles, from tractor trailers to knives and forks. Somebody is coordinating all of those emergency response vehicles to make sure the whole area is being covered. Somebody is working with other agencies and government to make sure the entire community is being served. Somebody is managing the communication and technology needs of a very large organization. Somebody is handling living arrangements and feeding arrangements for the volunteers, most of whom are pretty far away from home. Somebody is handling the health needs of clients and volunteers. And somebody has to train all those people to prepare them for the roles that they now play. All of the jobs that DCS volunteers do can be broken into 5 areas, each of which is essential in enabling the Red Cross to accomplish its mission. Engaging volunteers and employees is the set of processes that recruits, trains, and supports the volunteers and employees who make up the disaster workforce. This includes activities that help people choose their role, grow in that role, develop new skills and abilities, and perhaps someday to move into a different role or a leadership position within the team that they currently serve. Mobilizing the community is a set of activities that helps individuals and groups in the community prepare to respond to disaster. This includes providing information and support, training sessions, meeting with community groups, partnering with fire departments to install smoke alarms, and a number of other activities. Aligning with government helps the Red Cross work with local government agencies to build and strengthen their relationships. This will help communities be better able to respond to and recover from disasters. Information management and situational awareness helps Red Cross and government leaders understand the impacts of a disaster and plan for future responses. Deploying materials, workers, and technology is a set of processes that actually gets the Red Cross onto the scene, providing people, equipment, and supplies to respond to a disaster. This also includes setting up computer networks, communications, logistics, vehicle support, and recruiting, assigning, and deploying workers. All the activities that are necessary to make a response work. Disasters come in all sizes. The Red Cross responds to nearly 64,000 disasters a year, and 90% of these are home fires. Some of the busiest people in DCS are those people who respond locally in their communities to home fires. The Red Cross also responds to larger scale disasters, and that usually involves volunteers from all over the country coming together and forming an organization to handle the response. 95% of Red Cross disaster workers are volunteers, so virtually every position in the Red Cross is available to volunteers, whether it's entry level or expert or leadership. And finally, all Red Cross disaster assistance is free. It's equally available to everyone. So, as a Red Cross volunteer, you'll be dealing with a diverse set of clients. Across the United States, the Red Cross is divided into regions, and you are a volunteer in the Eastern New York region. That's the 27 county area you see in green on the map, running from Orange and Putnam counties in the south to the northern state border, and from the eastern state border about halfway across to the west. The region is divided into three chapters: the Central and Northern New York, Northeastern New York, and Hudson Valley chapters. The chapter is where a lot of the Red Cross's local business is conducted, and in many cases, the chapter is the public's view of the Red Cross organization. Disaster Cycle Services uses a different map to ensure that our services are available equally throughout the region. This map shows how Disaster Cycle Services divides the region into 5 territories. Each territory has a dedicated staff manager and a variety of volunteer teams. Some DCS activities involve the entire region, while others are conducted in each individual territory. Depending on the position you choose, you might work at the regional level, or you might join a territory team and deal primarily with territory level volunteers. In those positions, it's in your territory that you'll finish your training and do your day-to-day work. This diagram shows how the Disaster Cycle Services organization is structured in the Eastern New York region. First, note that blue boxes represent employees of the Red Cross, and yellow boxes represent volunteers. The leader of DCS is the Regional Disaster Officer, who manages the staff of employees who manage activities at both regional and territory levels. The regional managers who report to the Regional Disaster Officer partner with regional volunteer leads to manage activities that span the entire region. These people and these functions are managed from the regional office at Albany. Preparedness specializes in activities like the home fire campaign and community preparedness education. Direct Services is responsible for ensuring that service delivery is consistent across the region and helping territories develop their strategies and plans. Workforce Engagement supports the growth and development of DCS volunteers through activities like onboarding and placement, training, recognition and appreciation, and leadership development. And there are some disaster program activities that operate at the regional level, and for each of these activities, the team of volunteers is managed by a disaster program manager and led by a volunteer program lead. Each territory also has a disaster program manager who coordinates all of the territory level disaster activities in the territory area. Just like at the regional level, territory level programs are delivered by teams of volunteers, and each team is managed by a disaster program manager and led by a volunteer program lead. These activities are managed at the chapter or territory offices across the region. The exact number and makeup of the teams might vary from territory to territory, depending on the needs of the communities in that territory. Now it's time to start thinking about the job you'll do in disaster cycle services. As you think about your options, keep in mind that most positions include activity during a disaster operation, in what we call operational state or gray sky, and also when there is no disaster operation, which we call steady state or blue sky. Only a few jobs are limited to one state or the other. Whatever job you choose, you can always change your mind. You could take on additional jobs, leave jobs, or change from one position to another at any time. Every Red Cross position gives you an opportunity to learn and grow, and most positions also give the opportunity to advance into leadership roles if that's what you'd like to do. Some positions might not always be available in every territory. Also, some positions require professional licenses, such as the disaster health services or disaster mental health positions. Before you can deploy as a disaster responder, you must complete a set of training that prepares you for the job you've chosen. When you finish your training, you earn a certification that we call the GAP, the Group, Activity, and Position, that describes the job you're now qualified to perform. Here's an example of a GAP. One of the major groups within disaster cycle services is mass care. This is the group that deals with large numbers of clients. One activity under mass care is sheltering. These are the teams that set up and manage residential shelters. And within sheltering, there's a hierarchy of positions: service associate, supervisor, manager, and chief. So if you're a service associate working in sheltering, your gap would be mass care, sheltering, service associate. Here are some examples of operational positions that are available to volunteers in disaster cycle services. The mass care group includes teams that set up and manage residential shelters for clients who've been displaced by a disaster. They prepare and deliver food to clients in shelters and in the community. They reunite families who have been separated. And they distribute emergency supplies throughout the community to help residents start their recovery. The individual care group provides health services, mental health services, and spiritual support to clients and responders. The recovery group works with individual clients to help identify their disaster-caused needs and match them with resources and assistance. The response group includes disability integration specialists who ensure that Red Cross services are accessible to everyone in the community. The logistics group manages all of the equipment and supplies that are needed for a successful disaster relief operation. This includes facilities for shelters and headquarters, procuring, warehousing, transporting, and distributing essential materials. The technology group provides computer operations support, communications, networking, and other services to meet the technology needs of the response organization. The staff services group supports the responders. They manage lodging and feeding for responders who are away from home. They integrate local volunteers into the operation and provide all the necessary training. And they work with supervisors and managers to ensure that every team gets the personnel support it needs. The information and planning group manages financial and statistical analysis to ensure that the response is being managed efficiently. They also assess the damage caused by the disaster to help the Red Cross and other agencies plan their response and recovery efforts. The External Relations Group works with partners and government agencies to coordinate activities and information. They also manage special fundraising efforts for the disaster response and work with news agencies to keep the public informed about Red Cross operations. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few positions that are only active in steady state. In other words, they don't include the opportunity to deploy to disaster relief operations outside the region. If you choose one of these positions and would also like to deploy, you should think about qualifying for a second position that provides that opportunity. The Disaster Action Team provides 24-hour emergency response to local disasters, usually house fires. They address the client's immediate needs, including temporary emergency shelter, financial assistance for food and clothing, replacement medication, and emotional support. The Disaster Duty Officer is the dispatcher and manager of disaster action teams in the field. In addition to supporting the DAT, the duty officer also involves other teams as needed to provide all the support that a client needs. This might include client casework, disaster health services, or additional financial assistance. The Disaster Workforce Engagement Team supports the growth and development of DCS volunteers through activities like onboarding new volunteers, job placement, training, recognition and appreciation, and leadership development. Workforce engagement also manages the deployment of volunteers to disaster responses and maintains the quality of volunteer connection member profiles. The preparedness team supports the citizens of the region in preparing for disasters. The Home Fire Campaign installs free smoke alarms in community residences, providing fire safety education and working with partners to build community relationships. Community preparedness education provides preparedness education to community members and organizations, working with partners to build community relationships. The Pillowcase Project and Prepare with Pedro bring education into schools and community settings to teach children how to prepare for emergencies. There's also one position that only exists in operational state. Staff services teams are formed during a disaster relief operation, usually by deploying members of disaster workforce engagement teams. That brings us to the end of the presentation. Now that you've seen a little about the opportunities DCS has to offer, the next step is to meet with your disaster program manager and workforce engagement to review your options and choose a position. Be sure to finish the instructions on your new volunteer checklist before the meeting. If you don't have a date for that meeting yet, contact the person who sent you the checklist. One more thing. The Red Cross wants to know how much time we all spend in our volunteer activities. So Volunteer Connection has a function where you can log the number of hours you spend on things like watching this video, taking training courses, attending meetings, traveling to and from activities, and anything else you do that is part of your Red Cross volunteer experience. So get into the habit of logging hours in Volunteer Connection whenever you spend time on Red Cross activities. On behalf of the Regional Disaster Workforce Engagement Team and the entire Eastern New York region, thank you again for joining us. Over 3.6 million people throughout our 27-county, 51,000 square mile area count on us to provide relief to victims of disaster and help people prevent, prepare for, and respond to emergencies. Whatever position you choose, you're going to make a positive difference. Welcome to the team.